So 2 years ago, almost to the day, actually, I launched my YouTube channel with 0 subscribers. And then I think about a month or two ago, I surpassed 100,000 followers on YouTube. But my biggest platforms have actually been TikTok and Facebook. And I also have 2 partnerships with Snapchat. So I have 2 shows on Snapchat. And then of course post on Instagram as well. So all in about 2 years, I grew 1.7 million followers.
So can you walk us back just in terms of when you were back in the US, you were doing things for digital. Like how did you learn how to shoot and edit?
And then I've always had a passion for it. So I taught myself on iMovie. I find that's like the best for people who just want to who genuinely just want to tell a story using video, but don't have any formal training. iMovie was good. But so for me, it was actually really difficult because when I moved to CNBC in Singapore in 2016, they they knew nothing essentially. They're like, yeah, launch a digital video team. And it was kind of like the blind leading the blind. I was like, shouldn't I have a MacBook for this? And so they got me a MacBook, but that took a few weeks. And yeah, so a lot of it was, to be honest, self-taught editing. I used Adobe Premiere Pro at CNBC, and to this day, I personally use Adobe every day, Adobe Premiere Pro. But it was mostly self-taught with some tutorials in between on YouTube. But it was mostly basic editing. To this day, I don't do crazy effects or anything fancy. So yeah, it was Adobe. It was Adobe. And then to shoot is an interesting question. So I remember when I was at MTV, one of the camera guys called in sick, so they asked me to go film a red carpet, and they did give me a crash course in the DSLR right before. And I remember being on a red carpet asking the guy from like CBS and Inside Edition, who was like twice my age. I'm like, oh, can you check my camera settings? And he's like, who is this kid with the MTV News microphone cube? So I was like, I'd rather embarrass myself in front of them than go back to the studio and not have recorded audio or something. So for me, I actually have a very tumultuous relationship with DSLRs because there's a lot that can go wrong. So I would recommend everyone take a lot of notes, especially if learning DSLR.
Question would be, when you transitioned into digital media, did you take into account the popularity of the sites and like how, for example, Facebook was once super popular and then now today it's TikTok. So do you have any advice on how to keep up with like these trends that may ebb and flow on social media?
So TikTok helped give me like the confidence that I was kind of onto something, just because of the runaway, viral videos that happened on TikTok before any other platform. However, as a creator, monetization is important, especially, when you're starting out. So Facebook and YouTube pay way, way, way more than TikTok. So I would say per million views on Facebook, that can generate me between like $1,000 and $3,000 for every million views, versus on TikTok, 1 million views will get me about $30. So it's really night and day. Now I do average between 10 and 20 million views a month on TikTok and about 40, 50 million views on Facebook. So, so 90% of revenue really does come from Facebook, even though you're saying like, oh, but Facebook is on the decline and this and that. And a lot of that is true, but it's also very generational as well, right? Like Gen Z versus baby boomers and things like that. And at the end of the day, when it comes to monetization as a content creator, you really care about what's called CPM, which stands for cost per million. So CPM is the rate in which it's essentially the algorithm's telling you who is watching and how valuable they are, right? So for instance, if I do an economics documentary about the US, like let's say I do something about US inflation, chances are a lot of Americans are going to watch that on Facebook, especially, and a lot of maybe affluent Americans might watch it too. And so basically the rate that Facebook will pay me will be a lot higher. If let's say 1 million Americans watch that, especially in their 40s, 50s, 60s, I'm going to get paid a lot more, closer to like $4,000 for that million views, than if 1 million people see that in an underdeveloped country. because in that underdeveloped country, let's say India, Vietnam, Pakistan, if 1 million people watch it there, their spending power is so much less, right? So companies, advertisers are willing to pay a lot less. So like imagine Coca-Cola or L'Oreal, right? They're willing to pay, let's say, 2 cents to reach a viewer in Vietnam, but they're willing to pay 20 cents in US. Why? Because the products are so much different. So these are all things to take into account. Like as a content creator, we really want to maintain having US as our #1 audience because it pays the best, right?
Do you like write a set in stone script before you go to a new location and create a story about it? Or do you kind of just have like a goal in mind, and then once you get there, kind of, be flexible with what you get and what you learn?
There's something in journalism where it's like if your boss or editor sends you to cover a concert and then there's a fire at the concert, do you still write a review about the concert, or do you write about the fire, right? You write about the fire. So I think same thing with my stories. A lot of times, like in Luxembourg, I actually I do research. I mean, I definitely do a fair amount of research through reading articles and YouTube and sometimes maybe a podcast or two. But and I'll have an idea of what my piece to cameras or my stand-ups are going to be. So for instance, in Luxembourg, it's like, okay, what's going to be interesting? Who are the biggest companies here? Microsoft, Amazon. I obviously need to figure out what their address is, go there, try and get interviews if I can, right? So, and that, but a lot of that comes not even from like pre-research, but from just talking to people, especially taxi drivers and Uber drivers seem to be the best because they're bored, they want to talk, and they're full of information, right? So just interviewing them either on camera or usually off camera for research purposes, and getting to know like what are the nuances of the stories that I've researched.
I just have a pretty simple question. Just why is the content you upload like important to you? Like what motivates you to put your content out to the audience?
That motivates me. It's like, how do I take this like crazy situation happening to millions of people and explain it in a sympathetic, empathetic way to the world, to a wider audience? It's a challenge, but also like it excites me. It excites me to do it in a way that I don't want to say dumb it down because I hate that term, but to make it digestible, to make it understandable. And I think that's my biggest like gratification and my biggest pleasure right now is to if someone's like, oh yeah, I saw a headline about Lebanon, I saw a headline about Luxembourg or Qatar or whatever. But I don't really know what's happening. But then they see one of my videos, especially when I give sound to the citizens and to the people, not in a sympathetic way, right? But as a journalist, it's just like ask them what they feel, how they feel it, what's happening. Sometimes my editor uses like really sad music in documentaries like that, and I tell him, I'm like, no, 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 switch it. Like we can feel emotional, but our goal is not to drive an audience to feel like sorry for anyone, right? Maybe they do, and that's fine, that's good, but let them feel how they feel. And it's funny, one of my favorite comments as kind of being now an independent journalist, and I get this a good amount, is when people say, okay, so is this good or bad? Okay, so wait, how should we feel about it, right? And I'm like, okay, I did my job, right? Now it's up to you to decide. And I genuinely want, people in the comments to share how they feel and maybe debate each other.